For Susan Hernandez, her family was everything. She raised 7 children. The daughter described her as a beautiful person and a wonderful mother, a wonderful grandmother. The love of her life, her husband of 59 years, Carlos, died 6 months before. To keep her company in her Pueblo, Colorado home is her dog Baby and Vanessa, one of her daughters who lives right across the street. Katrina, who lives about 45 minutes away, talked to her mom daily every morning. The first thing always said her mom hadn't been sleeping well. She'd been stressed out about the new roof she'd hired her grandson Anthony Sena to install. Whenever anything went wrong in her life, she would turn to God and pray, but on this one Wednesday in late July, 77-year-old Susan Hernandez would need so much more than prayers. That Wednesday morning, first thing Katrina did was call her mom a little bit after 7 o'clock in the morning. Her mom didn't pick up, so Katrina left a voicemail, told her they would talk later, and wished her a good day. For some reason, she thought to call her mom again. Still no answer. She had a horrible gut feeling going through her stomach. She closed up her house and drove down to her mother's house. When she arrived, she was greeted not by her mother, but by clouds of smoke. The smoke was coming from the basement where her mother was. She called the police and fire crews to put off the fire and rescue her mother, oblivious that her mother was already dead by this time. Detective Purvis responded to the call. As he reached the house, he immediately noticed signs of forced entry. The door jamb was broken and splintered. It appeared that someone had kicked open the door. Inside, things seemed untouched, and nothing was out of order. Mrs. Hernandez had been set on fire at the basement and had been bludgeoned. She had a large hole to the back of her head. This was considered by the detective as a clear homicide based on the blood splatter at the scene, a clear indication that she had been struck multiple times. However, a cash box that had large amounts of cash was missing, a high probability that the murderer took it with him or her. As the family gathered outside Susan's house, Anthony walked up to Brenda, his aunt, to comfort her, and also wondering who would do this to her grandma. But deep inside he knew who was responsible. Brenda would later consider those hands as filthy hands and feel disgusted of the time his hands were around her. Family members were interviewed in different interview rooms, and Purvis was assigned to Anthony Sena, which is Susan's grandson. Anthony was supposed to redo Susan's roof that she had been stressed out about. While waiting for Detective, Anthony notices the cameras and switches seats. During the interview, Anthony said his grandmother had written him 2 checks, one for the materials and one for the labor. The cost would be $7,600. Anthony had done some prison time for stealing, armed robbery of an armored car, and has always been in trouble all the time since he was little. Eventually, Anthony and his other family members were freed to go. A couple of nights later, Vanessa approaches some cops on the street and told them that she suspected her son, Anthony, but didn't want to end up dead like her mother. The family was summoned again for investigation, and Purvis was assigned to Anthony again. As they were walking on the hallway, he stops and says, "You don't have anything on me. If you had, you'd arrested me by now." As the detectives continued with their investigation, they realized that Susan's body had not been totally burned. So, there was one hand that had some fingernails or fingers left to it. When the pathologist had taken these samples from underneath the fingernails, it was sent off to CBI for analysis. Results later came back as YSDR DNA that is found only in males and identified 5 potential suspects: Anthony Sena, Devin Sena, Bruce Sena, Sebastian Sena, and Joseph Sena, which is the father to all the 4. The shocker is that they are all her own family members, so it was evident it was one of the Sena members. Looking at the 5 clues kept bringing them back to just one: Anthony, whose mother had found the murder weapon and identified this hammer that was in her kitchen as the potential murder weapon. A man found Susan's ID and some other cards of hers lying on the side of the road. Phone records eventually placed Anthony near the road where the cards were found and near the house the morning of the fire. Anthony tried all he could to cover up his tracks by going to the neighbor's house, asking if he had seen the grandmother that was to create an alibi. He then proceeded to post on Facebook, pouring out his heart about missing his grandparents. Anthony wrote, and I quote, "I love you, Grandma and Grandpa. You both have helped me so much over the years. No matter what was going on in my life, you were both there. My heart is broke and my mind a wonder without you both here. I will forever cherish our memories shared together. God has his choice now. Love you." Anthony's motive may have all stemmed from money in a roofing job that never was. Katrina said her mom told Anthony many times she wanted her money back. She also told her that she would call the cops on Tuesday if he doesn't bring the money back by Tuesday. She was unlived on that Tuesday, meaning Anthony already had an hint on possibility of being reported. Anthony at that time didn't have the money, so he had an option to either get the money or potentially just go ahead and kill his grandma and make it look like someone else did it, and that would be his way out. When the cops brought Anthony back for questioning, he tried to strike a deal by suggesting to give the money back and the cops call it a day. The cops told him they could take the money back, but still have a look at the murder, and that's what investigators continue to do. Eventually, the missing cash box is found hidden in Susan's closet. All leads that the detectives had led to Anthony Sena as their main suspect and culprit. After a 4-month investigation, Anthony Sena is arrested at his house for the murder of his own grandmother. His face at that moment was ghost white. He was scared. The jury found Anthony guilty after 4 hours of deliberations and is sentenced to life in prison without parole. Anthony Sena almost got away with this murder. If the hand had been burned, this case could probably have gone unsolved.